Back at it here on the Too Deep NFL podcast with us as always. Back from vacation, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. And a lot to talk about the running back position. Is it just never going to get its due? They don't get paid again. Three of them were franchised. None of them get a contract extension. What is going on with the value of the running back in the NFL? Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, and Josh Jacobs. None of them get deals. They'll play on the franchise tag. We'll see when they come in. Also, DeAndre Hopkins is a Titan. Is this a good fit? What does it do for the Titans? Is anybody going to be regretting not getting Hopkins? We'll talk about that. NFL executives have ranked the top 10 at each position. Did they get it right? We'll talk about that. ESPN put that out there. And, of course, our NFC East preview. We begin to preview each and every one of the divisions in the NFL, leading us all the way up to opening night on Thursday, September 7th, I believe it is, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the date. Maybe it's the 9th, in that range, September 7th. We're going to break it all down. It's coming up right now here on the Too Deep NFL podcast.
You're listening to the Too Deep Podcast, the most complete analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. Too Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Too Deep is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here are the hosts of the Too Deep Football Podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And welcome back, and thank you for joining us here on the Too Deep NFL podcast. A lot to get to as training camps are opening. The NFL season is going now in earnest, and so we are back at it with many things to discuss. And, guys, let's start with the running back position. Franchise tag deadline day came and went yesterday. Evan Ingram, a tight end, got a 3-year deal from the Jacksonville Jaguars. The three running backs, Barkley, Pollard, Jacobs, none of them got it. Jeff, let's start with you. What's your takeaway? What does this mean to you, the fact that none of these guys ended up getting a deal?
Well, it means exactly what every running back in the NFL who went on Twitter and complained about it felt about it, which is that teams clearly are not willing to go down that road with as much excitement as they would have even 2 or 3 years ago. When you look at the guys who've gotten big deals in the past, like Christian McCaffrey or Ezekiel Elliott or Alvin Kamara, they've gotten banged up. They've been really good players to a certain extent, but they haven't made good on those deals in the way you would have hoped. And so now you've got another crop coming down the pipe, like Barkley, like Pollard, and like Josh Jacobs, who want that same kind of investment, and teams just are a little more squeamish about it. But I think there are 3 different categories here. And Barkley, to me, is the most confounding just because he means so much to the Giants offense. It's hard for me to imagine that team functioning at a high level without him being there. Josh Jacobs was a guy that the Raiders did not give the 5th-year option to. Mm-hmm. I think they were looking more to go to a backfield by committee, which is something Josh McDaniels has done throughout his career as a coordinator in New England. So I don't think they were as concerned about that part of it. And Tony Pollard was hurt at the end of last season. And so that certainly affects your ability to negotiate a long-term deal. But the 3 combined, it certainly makes a big statement about what people think about the position.
Yeah, and I can tell you that, this is a spot that for whatever reason, it took, I think, in my opinion, the bigger story here, Eric, is what took them so long to come around and understand that the running back position just isn't worth what they were giving out in the NFL?
It hasn't. I mean, so the average salary for a running back has just been flat. I mean, in both real and like, if you look at real terms after inflation of the cap and stuff, it's actually gone down. So like, I just think this year's the weird year that you had these high profile guys take to social media and express it for themselves. And then you had, the comeback of Austin Eckler and Derrick Henry and other guys. I mean, you've also seen it's not only those three guys we talked about, it's Dalvin Cook getting released. It's Kareem Hunt being 27 years old and still pretty good, being on the free agency market. It's the relatively modest contracts that guys like Miles Sanders, and actual good players got in the position. I mean, we talk about DeAndre Foreman is like he had a 950 yards last year, and like he got like a 1 year, like $4 million deal from the Bears. It's just a position that has been, and I think the issue is running is not that effective relative to passing, and running backs are there's a bountiful crop of them, right? If you watch any spring games, USFL, XFL, running backs in those leagues are pretty good, right? They're good athletes, good backs, and you only need one of them per down. So it's all those factors. And then the really kicker is like the way in which drafts and rookie wage scales are constructed. They screw running backs over way more because the running backs at their peak are playing for NIL money in college, and previously it was for free. And then they're playing for, at the very best, a rookie NFL deal, which isn't that much money relative to the rest of the league.
I mean, is it ever going to change, Jeff, or is this it? Is this the new reality of the NFL?
I think it's changed a little bit. Now, the economics of it are looking bad, but I think teams are doing a better job of finding and developing players to be very multi-dimensional than their offense. So, again, a guy like Christian McCaffrey has value. Saquon Barkley has value because of what they're able to do within an offense, catching the football, running the football, making your quarterback situation a little easier to handle if you don't have a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen. You still need that. And the question is, are we going to reach a place where you're going to have more of those kinds of running backs in there and less of the guys like Isaiah Pacheco, who are, to me, is kind of like a one-trick pony, a guy you just hand the ball, go bang, and see what you can get out of him. But if you look at the numbers, I mean, teams ran the ball a lot more this past season than in probably the last 5 or 6 years because there was so much too high safety. I mean, it always goes in cycles, right? I mean, so you had a lot more of teams that were willing to hand the ball off and see what their running backs could do.
And they ran it more effectively too. Like the yards per play, expected points added, and run were all better because of what Jeff said. I think the one question maybe that's not going to get us all that. The one thing that's not going to get us all the way back is there are no bell cow running backs anymore. When you look at the number of running backs that get 250 or more carries a year, like that number is pretty small. And I just don't know if a veteran type player is going to be even a bell cow worthy. Like how many running backs other than like Derrick Henry and Nick, like how many of those guys have consecutive 200 carry seasons? It's just not that many after the first contract.
Listen, I think the future is the Deebo Samuels of the world, as much as he may not like carrying it, but 4 or 5 carries for a couple of wide receivers each, 10 or 12 carries maybe for the running back. And then they've got to catch the ball out of the backfield. Christian McCaffrey is that guy to me that I think every team's looking for because they want somebody that's a weapon in the passing game. I think him, Austin Eckler, those guys that are real weapons in the passing attack, those are the guys that have the value. And McCaffrey did get paid, and the 49ers traded for him, albeit with cheap quarterbacks on the roster, right? They've got more room to be able to add that number in, so they were the perfect fit to go get him. But I think there's, I think that's the running back of the future. That's the running back that can get paid. I think if you can really be a weapon in the passing attack, everyone knows, like, listen, Derrick Henry's a beast, and he does all this great football, but I mentioned it today on my radio show that, go back to that game that really made Derrick Henry, which was the AFC divisional playoff and beating the New England Patriots. And people talk about how he's just beating the hell out of the Patriots. And, oh, my God, he went for 220 yards or whatever the number was. Yeah, they were up 1 point.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they were doing everything they wanted to do. You go back 20 years ago, Bill Cowher, had the best record in football, had the number one rushing offense and the number one rushing defense. This is when it all became clear to me. And he said, we did everything we wanted to do this year. We're number one running the ball. We're number one stopping the run. You could hear Marty Schottenheimer smiling over his shoulder for the things they'd accomplished. He said, and we still didn't win. I've got to change what we're doing. And that's when they went out and got Ben Roethlisberger and they started throwing the football more. And that's when he won his Super Bowl, his only Super Bowl championship. That's like, seems like it should be obvious now. I think this running back boo-hoo that goes on is more about old journalists, old broadcasters, old media people yearning for the days of old when the running back meant more, or just having spent so long pushing against the new age guys like Eric Eager that are like, listen, guys, batteries in backwards here with paying all this money to running backs. And they're tired of it being proven, being proven wrong about it. I looked it up. The top 10 running backs on ESPN's top 10 running backs have played 52 total seasons. Do you know how many playoff seasons they have? 20. 20. It's more than that. You know what their record is in the playoffs? 13-20. None of them have ever made the Super Bowl. Never. Now, part of that is probably because when you have one of those guys, and Eric has talked about this a lot over the years, we've discussed it, your mindset is wrong. You justify how good they are. You keep handing the football, even though it's more efficient to throw the football. So we have, this example of like, okay, well, we got this back. We're going to use him. When in reality, it's great that you have that back, but you actually shouldn't use him that much. You should find a better way. McCaffrey's the one guy that can be used in an efficient manner. And I think Saquon Barkley, because he's a tremendous receiver as well. That's where I agree with you, Jeff. I'm a little bit surprised on him because he does make, not just by handing off, but by catching the football, he makes Daniel Jones better. And you just put $45 million into that guy.
Yeah. And well, two things here. One is that and I understand this from a general manager's standpoint, it's very, very dangerous to have a highly paid quarterback and a highly paid running back. You don't want to have that much money concentrated into your backfield. But two, I would argue that it's not so much the running backs can't win the playoffs. Usually when you have a good running back in the NFL now, it means that your quarterback isn't very good. So to me, a more interesting storyline with what we're talking about here is what do the Colts do with someone like Jonathan Taylor when you've got a rookie quarterback playing and he may or may not be ready to run your offense?
Yep.
Are you willing to invest in Jonathan Taylor to the extent that these other teams won't invest in the Saquon Barkleys and the Tony Pollards, because we got to find a way to make it easier for him to play football and a way to stay competitive? Because Tony Pollard, if he came around 3 or 4 years ago when Dak Prescott was still more of a mystery as a quarterback, he might get paid more money, right?
Yeah, Jeff, I think that's a great point. And Eric, how about Anthony Richardson, who's barely played any college football? He is the guy that's probably going to take a little time, but he's also on a rookie contract. Do you jump on? This is what I'd like to see if somebody will do. He's got one more year on his rookie deal, but do you go ahead and use the cap space you've got because you've got a cheap quarterback and pay Jonathan Taylor now? Get a big fat signing bonus here. Get the money. Front load, give him a big contract. Move up his pay this year. Move up his pay next year when he figures to still be healthy, so that then you've got him on lesser deals, a lot less against the cap, and you can eject when theoretically, hopefully, what better be the case, Anthony Richardson's ready to carry your team. That's a little bit different. Does somebody start, manipulating the cap a little better than just always trying to backload every contract they sign?
Yeah, I mean, the only issue with backloading is that generally speaking, it's better because you can roll over cap dollars every single year. So whether you front load or back load, I think teams have been a little bit, but yeah, it is better to front load than it is, if you have the space and you have nothing to spend it on, for sure. And to your point, like then you have Jonathan Taylor, who's, I think the biggest thing, and Jeff could probably speak to this too, having played, like, to me, the issue about the running backs is like sometimes he's one of the best players on your team, and maybe not the most valuable, but one of the best players. And for your team to constantly go out and not support those players who have done those kinds of things, I think that has a little tangible issue in the locker room. That to me is one place where obviously guys like me are not going to be able to measure that. And I do think that that's real. That gets you out of that jam if you happen to have some spending. And so I do agree with you that they like some of these teams should get out ahead of it, and then those running back deals aren't so bad at the end.
Yeah. I would be interested. Saquon Barkley's a guy, I know he had back-to-back hurt, injury-plagued years in years 3 and 4, but he's a guy that I think is a stud. And I'm surprised. I said when I was doing ESPN this past weekend that I thought the Giants weren't going to sign him because I don't know how you put the money down on Daniel Jones and then don't give the best weapon he's got back to him. So that one was surprising to me. I thought they were going to do it. It is a new regime. They didn't draft him, but he's your best player on the offensive side of the ball for sure. So that one was a little bit surprising to me. I get it. It might end up being the right decision in the long haul. But I mean, good luck. I mean,
well, and as a GM, not to cut you off, as a GM, you want to be able to make sure those kind of investments in quarterbacks like Daniel Jones do pay off. So you want to give them everything that they can have to succeed, right? You don't want to go out there and be like, hey, look, make it happen for you. Saquon's not here, and then be embarrassed by what he can't do for you. Then it's like a double whammy.
But Jeff, don't you think that that's what they think that they're trying to do here? Like Barkley's not going to sit the whole year.
No, yeah.
Because and so in theory, like they are doing that because they're keeping Barkley and they're like the thing is like if we ignore that probability, however big, that any of these players don't play this season, then it makes some sense for the Giants, right? Because you invested in the quarterback, which is kind of a better aging asset, even though the current value, like Daniel Jones, is not as good as Barkley at their positions. But then you're at least tacking more onto Barkley because even let's say he balls out this year, you slap another tag on him, it's like $13 million. It's nothing, right? Like it's nothing compared to some of these other positions. So I feel like they are trying to surround Daniel Jones. It's just that it's not the way that Barkley's getting kind of, he relative to getting a longer term deal, he's getting a raw deal here.
I do think what's interesting is by all accounts, Saquon Barkley's been very good with his money, right? And is he the guy that's going to be like, all right, I'm going to stick it to you. I'm going to sit 10 weeks and then I'm going to come back in for the minimum just to go ahead and check off that final year. And you can go ahead and slap the franchise tag on me again for the plus 20%, but I'm not going to play that one either. And, because he's physically a very impressive looking guy. Again, any running back can get hurt, but I think it'll be interesting. I think that's one. He's been the most vocal and adamant, and I think it'll be interesting to see how he plays it. Is he a guy that says like, yeah, I can live without the money for a while. I'll do this. I'll take a little free time and I'll check back in just for the bare minimum to get that year. We've seen other positions do that, but I also think as a running back, you're over the hill at 28 now. So are you really going to squander one of your prime years? It didn't work for Le'Veon Bell back in the day. So I think it bears watching for sure. We're brought to you here on the 2D podcast by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, the best when it comes to fixing any of your parking lot problems. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they're no problem. They've been making them disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crew. Every project comes with a written warranty. They're online at GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. Let's talk about what we saw with DeAndre Hopkins. Tennessee Titans get him. Jeff, how much does this make you think the Tennessee Titans are a challenger? Does it at least get them up to where they're close to, if not even with the Jacksonville Jaguars in their own division?
I don't know if they're even with them. I feel like Jacksonville has got a better roster and a better quarterback, but it certainly puts them back into the conversation because if they had the same receiver situation they had last year, it would be a disaster. I mean, as much as Mike Vrabel didn't want to talk about that stuff publicly, he had to look at that roster, midway through last year and just be apoplectic about A.J. Brown playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. Hopkins gives them, certainly not the explosiveness that A.J. Brown offered, but certainly a guy who's a proven factor in the passing game who can help your offense out. If Derrick Henry can stay healthy, if Tannehill can be somewhat serviceable, they can coach up the rest of that team and compete. I mean, they were playing for the division championship and a playoff spot at the end of last year with a team that lost half its roster, it seemed, to injury at some point. So, yeah, I think they can be a factor. And it probably is the best move for him. I know he's taking a lot of crap on Twitter about, he said you want to play with these quarterbacks or play for a winner and all this. You took the money. that's what guys his age do. This is his last big deal. He has, he had some leverage there. He played it right. He got a better deal than what Odell Beckham got in the end. And I think that's probably what mattered the most.
Did he do it? Did he play this right? And are the Titans a contender, Eric?
Did he play it right? I don't know if he had much more to play. I mean, he was trying his best to get one of these contenders to trade for him, and then they wouldn't. And then obviously staying in Arizona was stupid, so it was good to get out from underneath that. And then, he took the best deal for himself financially here. So, yeah, I think so. I think as far as the Titans, we all talk about Vrabel and kind of that, hidden genius of his, and he is really, he really has coached above the talent. I mean, to get the AFC's 1 seed 2 years ago when they had the most injuries, games missed in NFL history is huge. But we saw in the second half of the season, he's not enough to overcome a lack of talent. And I look at offensive line. Andre Dillard's out, or Andre Dillard's in at left tackle. Petit Freer was gambling on games, so he's out for 6 weeks. They're terrible up there. Henry needs at least a little bit of blocking. And who knows how much Tannehill has left. I think, this is third offensive coordinator in 5 years in Tennessee. So I'm a little skeptical of his performance here.
I will tell you who's going to regret it. I think the New England Patriots are going to regret not making this move. And they've got the cheap quarterback as well. They should be the team that should be going and getting it. I'm a little surprised. And by all accounts, the people I talked to up there were like, yeah, the Patriots were not anywhere near to putting this kind of number out there to DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, they made it sound almost like the Titans. I don't think this was the case because I don't think, the Titans would bid just against themselves and get bidded up. But maybe this is what the Patriots want people to think. If they didn't get him, we're going to act like we didn't put anything in there. But the Patriot reporter on ESPN said, no, they weren't anywhere near this kind of figure. Do you buy that, Jeff? And are the Patriots the team that missed on not getting him signed?
I do buy it. And if you look at, Bill Belichick's history with receivers, it's always been, kind of a mixed bag as far as what he's got. And he's putting a lot more resources into that position through veteran moves, getting Devontae Parker, paying for Juju. And Kendrick Bourne's still there too from San Francisco from a couple of years ago in free agency. So I see it from a number standpoint where he's so stubborn about, okay, I can coach up the talent. We'll find a way to make it work. He's not going to go the extra mile to get a player like this, even though he clearly loves DeAndre Hopkins. He's always made it very public about his affection for his abilities. But yeah, I just think the numbers that he was talking about, once you've already paid those other guys, Bill Belichick just financially, the cap-minded GM that he is not going to say, all right, this is the guy that's going to put us over the top and make Mac Jones great. He's smart enough to know that you're still looking up at Buffalo, the Jets, and Dolphins, no matter who you sign at that spot.
I'm a little surprised. I would have thought, a couple of years ago, they signed 2 tight ends, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. And I would have thought that DeAndre Hopkins with Juju Smith-Schuster, you're throwing numbers at the problem, right? Yeah. That to me, Eric, is one of the reasons why I was a little surprised that the Patriots weren't the one to get him. I thought that they would sign him before he ever left town. And listen, I know what everyone's going to say. Well, they signed Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. They didn't win anything. They did go 10-7 and make the playoffs that year. They didn't last year when they didn't spend anything. I don't know. I mean, I'm more inclined to be like, the league is passing Bill Belichick by if he's thinking the way to get better is to not sign receivers for his quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's weird because he's not any good at drafting them either. I mean, his history is horrendous there. They did get Parker back. The Parker deal wasn't a lot. They had, but they lost Jacoby Myers, which Jacoby Myers is probably the best of Juju Smith-Schuster, him and Devontae Parker. So yeah, it was a weird situation. I don't know why the Parker renegotiation / re-signing happened while they were going in with Hopkins. Maybe that caused an issue, but just like with Odell though, to get these veteran receivers into a camp, you gotta go over the top of the whole market by quite a bit. We saw that with Odell. We're seeing that now with Hopkins, and that spooks a team like the Patriots, a team that's never been a team other than with Darrelle Revis and scant others has ever gone and paid market rates for a player.
Yeah. I don't know. I think they're going to regret it. I think it's going to be a big mistake when it's all said and done. We're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They're hiring. You can find your next gig right there at GannAsphalt.com. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based upon experience. Managers, drivers, operators, crew members. Go to GannAsphalt.com right now. Jeff, the top 10s in the NFL. Obviously, the quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, top there. Anything that, you look at and really just jumps at you as to something they got right, that they got wrong. This is, by the way, if you haven't seen it, it's a composite. It's a poll that's been put together they polled NFL executives and had them rank 1 through 10. What jumps out at you?
Well, one, I was surprised that Patrick Surtain was the top rated corner. And he's a great player, but I didn't realize he was that well thought of within league circles, so to be above some of the guys who usually see there, Jalen Ramsey and Marlon Humphrey. I mean, speaks to what the Broncos have in him. And then secondly, I mean, with the Niners had the best roster, or at least the most players on this list, and Deebo Samuel wasn't even in the group. I mean, so it speaks to how much pressure is on them to win a championship and how painful it had to be to lose their quarterback in the NFC Championship game last year and miss out on an opportunity to compete for a ring last season. I mean, I think that this team is stacked. We knew it before, and clearly around the league, everybody believes the same thing.
How about you? What's your biggest takeaway, Eric, from these top 10 lists and how much they're an indicator for who's going to be good this year?
You know as much as anybody that I'm a huge Wisdom of the Crowds fan, and I love, I think that especially their independent thinkers, you average over their opinions, and you're going to do pretty well. The person that had Justin Jefferson 7th at wide receiver, and the person that had Patrick Mahomes 2nd at quarterback, look, like I have a week off, sometime soon. I'd like the recreational activities you're working on there, because to me those kind of like. To me, I felt like those were like, who has Justin Jefferson 7th at wide receiver? I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, I don't either. And it's good to know that if Justin Jefferson gets out there in the free agency, that guy won't be bidding for him.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're like, I want to know what we know. We don't have to worry about his team because I don't think Jefferson's going to get out there. I think the Vikings are going to make him the highest paid receiver in the history of football. But I think it's unreal to think that, he doesn't, that he's not.
Yeah. Imagine being like, oh, the Kirk Cousins makes him good or something. Like, what is the narrative that puts him at 7?
I don't know.
And who's crazier, the 7 on Jefferson or the 2 on Mahomes?
Yeah.
Who's more insane?
Well, who was 1? Did they say who that guy picked as 1? I'm assuming it was Burrow or Allen. Probably Burrow. Joe Burrow.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Cincinnati guy, right? Like that's where it is. Look, there is, I mean, I'll say on the Burrow one, he is 3-1 in his career against Patrick Mahomes. Now, it's not a head-to-head award. That's not how it is. That's the problem. These are rankings. First of all, that's wrong. It's a wrong ranking. I'm going to say that because it's not about a head-to-head. I mean, you got one quarterback that's been to 5 straight conference championship games, 3 Super Bowls, and won 2 of them. That's it. Here into the discussion. Jeff, even you would put Patrick Mahomes at the top, right?
Yeah. What am I not?
I know. Well, that's my point. But if anyone's considered a guy who's like not gonna do it, it would be you, and that's a no-brainer to me. But I don't know. Is it a fool's errand to rank the top 10? Are there guys like Aaron Donald's the best defensive lineman when healthy? Chris Jones is the best, second best, based upon he's maybe the only guy who can rush the passer the way Aaron Donald does. Maybe doesn't play the run as well as Aaron Donald does. And then you got kind of groups like, is this a flawed system, Jeff, in 1 through 10, in doing that? Because, 10 and 3 might be closer together than 2 is to 1 or something like that.
Yeah. Having done these kinds of things before in my career, you'd be astounded at how little time the people you're asking actually give to thoughtful answers. Like sometimes they're just rattling off names, and maybe this was a guy, especially with Jefferson, who was probably just, all right, here's whatever, Tyreek Hill, and here's the guys from Cincinnati, and here's Stephon Diggs. Maybe he just got to a point. He's like, okay, yeah, I'll throw in Jefferson as well, and didn't think about, if somebody sees this, I'm going to look like an idiot based on what I'm saying. You know what I mean? I think that this sounds more the Burrow Mahomes things. Is this the same guy we're talking about? It's just two different people.
I think they're probably two different. There's no way you could.
Yeah, that would be I don't know how that guy would have a scouting job or front office job in the NFL if you do that. But yeah, I could easily see where someone on the Jefferson side could just omit him. And maybe there is somebody out there who says, the only thing I would say in Burrow's defense that I can see where somebody liking him more than Mahomes is when you think about where the Bengals were when he showed up versus where the Chiefs were when Mahomes started. He had a much tougher grind. I think it's a much tougher lift to lift up a franchise that's been moribund for years and do what Burrow has done in Cincinnati versus Mahomes walking into a situation where you have established Travis Kelce, established Tyreek Hill, one of the greatest coaches in NFL history in Andy Reid. I think that there are a lot more things playing in his favor, but certainly if I had to choose one to be the best, Mahomes would be the guy.
I do think it's interesting, like who would be at the top of your running back list, right? Because if you look at what the executives came up with, number one was Nick Chubb. Would he be number one on yours, Eric?
Nick Chubb is the best pure runner in football, but if I had to do like receiving and all that other stuff, I'd put McCaffrey first. McCaffrey's the best overall running back in football.
Jeff, who's number one on your list?
I would take Chubb just because he's been healthy and he's been consistently productive. He hasn't been as banged up as McCaffrey. People forget, they don't forget McCaffrey for a couple of years there was just he missed a ton of games before he got to the Niners. So he's in a better spot, but for a long time there, he just couldn't stay healthy in Carolina. But yeah, that vote is more about the here and now. I mean, Derrick Henry, if you had that vote a year ago, would have been number one by a mile.
If I'm an NFL executive and I see Nick Chubb ranked number one, I'm so happy that we're still so far ahead of the curve over so many of my and I don't know how many executives he talked to, but let's say this is the consensus from 32 GMs. I'm like, we're going to win a lot of games, boys, because they're missing the boat. You got to be able to catch the ball. If you can't catch the ball, you can't be number one. And I get it. I love Nick Chubb. The runner. I think he averaged 5 yards a carry against a stacked box. I mean, he's amazing. He's a stud. He's an absolute stud. So in no way, shape, or form do I want to sound like I'm running down Nick Chubb. But when I saw this list, I'm like, the two best running backs for modern football are Christian McCaffrey 1, Saquon Barkley 2, because of how dynamic they can be in the passing game. Maybe Austin Eckler, and I'd even listen to Austin Eckler being a mix in there, because I think helping your quarterback, helping in the passing game is by far a much more important part. I guess it's health, but the only thing that means is Nick Chubb's going to get hurt. Don't draft Nick Chubb this year because he's made it to the top based upon being healthy. So he's definitely going to get hurt. That's what I hear when I see that up there. All right, let's talk about the NFC East. We're going to preview a division each and every week of the 2 Deep podcast leading up to the start of the season. Jeff, the NFC East is what? Whose world? All Eagles, Cowboys. They had 3 teams. The Giants were in there as well last year. Do you give any shot to the Commanders making a run at it? How do you see the NFC East?
Eagles are still my team, even though history would suggest they might take a step back after losing the Super Bowl and taking some hits to their roster. But and losing 2 coordinators. But I love the roster construction. I love the culture of him. The quarterback, to me, it proved last year that he's certainly one of the better quarterbacks in this league, but probably one of the top 3 or 4 leaders overall. I think he brings a lot to the table in that regard. And, you always want to try to pick the Cowboys and love them more. And maybe this offseason, what they've done gives them a chance to be better. But I just feel like they're always doing something to stumble along the way that the Eagles didn't do. I think the Eagles have ascended in a really good way, have created a really nice model for winning, and they're going to keep doing that.
The odds, Eric, which I know you always enjoy the odds, to win the NFC East, just the division. Eagles -110, so they're favored against the field. You always like to point that out. Cowboys +175, so less than 2-1 return if you bet the Cowboys. Giants +750. The Commanders +1,000. Does that look like the Eric Eager index as well?
Yeah, I would give a little bit more probability to Dallas and Washington and less to New York. But I think the ordering is correct. I'm with Jeff. Like, I always think, like, I'm big, like, on Cowboys either win the division or have a top 8 pick. Like, I think there's a big distribution there. Losing Kellen Moore, I think, is offset by their offense's biggest weakness last year, which was that they didn't have a deep threat, and now they have Brandon Cooks. So I do think Dallas is live at +170. I do think Washington's going to be better than the New York Giants. You look at the Giants' schedule; they open at home against Dallas. They go on the road the 4 out of the next 5 games. They have 2 home games, and then they go on the road 3 times again. So, like, the first 13 games, I believe it's 9 road games or 8 road games or something like that. And they don't get their bye till week 13. The Giants are going to be a mess. They could even be better than last year, but I think their record's going to be so much worse.
One of the things that play, Jeff, for the Giants is, real quiet, like, they paid Daniel Jones. They clearly made a statement that all his receivers are the problem. They let Evan Ingram go 2 years ago. The Jaguars grabbed him and then franchised him and gave him a 3-year contract. He had, I think, about 750 yards and 75 catches and 4 touchdowns. I'll play him with Trevor Lawrence. We'll see what happens with Kadarius Toney in Kansas City. But, they did a lot of, like, it seems like just get rid of guys to get rid of guys. And, the Evan Ingram thing, I think, is a bad look for them. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, it worked, but everyone's on their best behavior the first year of a coach. Now we're going to find out if Brian Dable can coach. Teams, there's a trend that during the 16-game seasons, teams that have lost more than 10 games, that won more than 10 games the next year, usually regress back to an average record of 7-9. And many of them bomb. Now, if you had a 10-plus win season again, it meant that you had a coach that was really good and you probably knew what you were doing and you were going to be good consistently. But I think there's a lot more to play. The Giants, year 2 is a big prove it year. And that's what's going on. And I'm with Eric. I think the Giants crash and crash hard this year. I think they are the team that finishes last.
Yeah, as much as people really were dismissing the Minnesota Vikings last year for what they accomplished, winning the NFC North with a point differential that was negative. The Giants were a much worse case of a team when you talk about trying to sustain success. I mean, I think it's very hard to win in this league without talent, without a lot of talent, and the Giants just don't have a lot of talent. I mean, it's forget about just the offensive side. On the defensive side of it, they were one of the worst rushing defenses in the league last year.
And they have stud defensive linemen too.
Yeah,
like I don't get it.
Yeah, and so it's hard. Like, what are you betting on as far as them continuing to be, whatever they were, a 9-win team last year? I mean, they obviously got the better of the Commanders and got some wins there, some tight games, but they're not going to keep doing that. Easily, you can see that flipped into them being a 5-6 win team based on what they have on their roster.
Yeah, for sure. I like the Dallas bet. I think that's the one where you actually get some return. I'm with you, Eric. If I were going to bet this division, there's no way you lay money with the Eagles. I just think they
both coordinators gone.
Yes,
a few starters leaving. I mean, and they did a better job, to Jeff's point, of keeping that roster together. But there's still defections. It's still a Super Bowl loser.
They also have a quarterback that takes a lot of hits, and while I think Marcus Mariota, 1 year, $5 million. I think if you're a good offensive mind, you got to be able to get something done with Marcus Mariota. But if Jalen Hurts goes down, they got big problems. And we know he didn't make it through last year unscathed. So why would you think he'd make it through this year unscathed? I don't know that I do. So, yeah, I think that's a little bit loose. Any of these coaches getting fired at the end of the year, Jeff? You got anybody you're looking at? Ron Rivera, got a new ownership coming in if that ever gets done. Theoretically a new ownership. So I guess technically he'd be on the hot seat. Everybody always thinks Mike McCarthy's on the way out. Nobody thinks anything's going to change in Philadelphia. Brian Dable's not getting fired after a year. Ron Rivera, Mike McCarthy, are they still there? We're talking next year.
I think Rivera is in a very unique situation in Washington just because of the lack of leadership and all the upheaval with ownership and the front office. I mean, he really went there and had a nice opportunity to grab power. And so I think it's a lot tougher to, even though they have new ownership, maybe that affects that. But I think he's the kind of coach with his record and his personality. I think a new owner would like to have someone with his demeanor and just experience on hand as you try to adjust. I mean, the obvious ones to me are Josh McDaniels with the Raiders and Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. I mean, those are the two guys you look at and say, outside of this division, NFC East, where you say they're going to be in trouble. But anybody else within that division, I don't think they're going to be taking a walk.
Hot seats, Eric, for any of the coaches?
Yeah, I think Washington's sneaky, right? Because even when they've been okay, right? 7-9, 7-10, and this year 8-1, but like they start 1-4 or worse every year. Like, does that, like I remember, when, this is like, when my childhood, but like when Red McCombs sold the Vikings to Ziggy Wilf in 05, Vikings started 2-5, finished 9-7. When they started 2-5, the new owners already knew they were firing Mike Tice, to the point where like they win that last game and like there's already the slips on everybody's chair. And so I think in Washington, it's like if Rivera has another one of those starts where it's like, what was it last year? 1-4. The previous year was like 1-6. The year they made the playoffs, it was 1-5, I think. But like if they start that badly again, I think that they're going to make their decision about him. And it could be right away, or it could just be in their minds.
Eric, you're younger than both Jeff and I. However, when the Vikings sold in 2005, you were not a child. So let's settle down about that. I'm pretty sure you could vote and be drafted.
Sorry, I said I was a sophomore in college. Sorry, but I went to college in Minnesota, so still my childhood home.
Yeah. Settle down. Like I said, Jeff and I will acknowledge being older than you.
Not Doogie Howser over here, right? It's like
13-year-old
college sophomore.
The child prodigy. All right, we'll break down the AFC East next week. We're going to break down each and every one of the divisions here in the Too Deep podcast. Remember, we're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They are the best when it comes to making your parking lot problems disappear. Don't let your first impression with your customers, your clients, be a terrible parking lot, be a bad situation. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lots. For Eric Eager from SumerSports.com, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Too Deep NFL podcast.